Good evening and welcome to SGTV's coverage of the 2023 Student Government Executive Candidate Debate. I'm Elizabeth Martinez.
And I'm Meagan Daukshus. Tonight we'll be seeing the candidates for President, Vice President, Speaker of the Student Senate, along with the newly reinstated treasurer position that was not in the 2022 election.
There is only one Vice President candidate this season, and it is Reaves. She is partnering with Thompson. The Thompson-Reaves campaign has a lot of different points this season. Is there anything that you're interested in hearing about?
I think something we see every year is parking being brought back up into the discussion on this campus. This year they are planning, if they win, to discuss bringing in a rolling application for parking on campus, along with creating better safety measures for game days, with including chargers at the Williams-Rice Stadium and discounted Ubers as well for students to get home safe
on game days. Yeah. The parking situation, the rolling application would drop prices for students, yearly parking from $800 to $400. So that's definitely a problem that students are interested in hearing about, of course. We also have a couple of candidates who are willing to completely add new classes to the Carolina Core program here on campus. Thompson and Reaves are planning to implement modules that will focus primarily on physical, mental, and financial wellness programs, problems that a lot of students have post-college, problems that will benefit, or classes that will benefit us post-college rather than just those career-based classes.
And we also have the other candidate, if you can remind me what their name is.
Reilly Arford,
Reilly Arford is also wants to reinstate Carolina Core classes that will bring in diversity and inclusivity into campus and make aware of the situations that we have on campus with that.
His plan is to implement these classes to focus on what the university will and will not accept in terms of diversity and inclusivity. Now, all candidates here tonight have noted that they see a gap between students and student government itself. The students are very interested in hearing about how they plan to merge this gap, this unfortunate situation, and not only bring student engagement to an all-time high, but also benefit the students themselves personally.
And a lot of the candidates that are here today are involved in different organizations and positions around campus, so they have already started bringing in people within their orgs to help discuss this issue on campus. And hopefully with the new candidates and new election this year, we will see the students being more involved with the student government.
Yes, that's one of the things that stood out most is the Arford and, of course, the Thompson and Reaves campaigns. Both of them focus on the diversity and inclusivity issues here on campus. Now, another thing that I wanted to point out is not only are they focusing on those diversity and inclusivity issues, but maintaining a positive environment and avoiding those hostile conditions embedded in student government itself.
That's a great point. I think that there will be a great amount of discussion tonight. I'm interested to see what's going to happen tonight. For SGTV News 4, I'm Meagan Daukshus.
And I'm Elizabeth Martinez. Stay tuned. We'll go live with that debate here shortly.
Welcome to this year's Executive Candidate Debate. My name is John Gladden, the 2023 Elections Commissioner for Student Government. I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. We are very excited to be able to host this debate so that candidates can share more about their visions about leading the student body. Tonight's debate will showcase each executive office separately to allow candidates for each office to present an overview of their platforms and respond to questions. Candidates for treasurer will be up first, followed by speaker, followed by vice president, and lastly, president. Before we get started, I'd like to encourage all of our candidates to challenge each other, but remain civil tonight. I don't think that will be an issue, but I have to put that disclaimer in. Debates like these allow us to engage in discourse about the future of our wonderful university. It is wonderful. And the student body and I are looking forward to hearing all of your wonderful ideas. To all the students watching tonight, I think that's the count. I want to thank you for being engaged in our university community. I also want to ask each of you to take what you hear tonight and share it with your fellow Gamecocks who are not here tonight. Once elected, the decisions these candidates make will have profound impacts on our student body, and it's important that as students we hold each other accountable and keep one another informed. I would also like to thank Student Gamecock Television and the Daily Gamecock for live streaming the debate tonight so that even more students can access this, it says great on the script, but wonderful event. With all that said, I would like to introduce our debate moderators. We have Editor-in-Chief of the Daily Gamecock, Sydney Dunlap, and SGTV's Station Manager, Caroline Smith, and myself. But let's give it up for these two ladies up here. I'm so thankful for Sydney and Caroline for being moderators and their willingness to dedicate their time with us tonight. They're truly great, wonderful individuals. With that, I'll run us through the rules for tonight. As Elections Commissioner, I'm all about the rules, so let's get to it. There are roughly 100 minutes for candidates to answer questions. Each candidate will have 60 seconds to provide an opening statement. They will then answer about 5 to 7 questions from social media asked by users and also questions prepared by our moderators. First will be the treasurer debate, like I mentioned. That'll be 25 minutes. Then the Speaker of the Student Senate debate, which will be 25 minutes. This is followed by the Student Body Vice Presidential debate, which will be 10 minutes, seeing that we only have one candidate. And then finally, the Student Body President debate, which will be 25 minutes as well. All candidates will have 60 seconds to respond to questions and will take turns answering. After a candidate has responded to a question, the opposing candidate may raise their hand to have an opportunity for a 30-second rebuttal. The original candidate may raise their hand to use an additional 15 seconds to continue debate as needed. I'll be keeping time and will make it known if you are running over time. Another thing, applause, light applause, appropriate applause, will be tolerated after the opening statements and also as candidates exit the stage, but keep it cordial, don't go overboard. So with that, let's proceed with our first candidates for the night. Student Body Treasurer candidates, please come forward to the stage.
Thank you so much, John, for kicking us off tonight, and welcome candidates for treasurer for the stage. Our first position for the night is student body treasurer, and for this position we have two candidates, Hannah Augsbach Lamma and Brandon Badinski. Candidates will now have 60 seconds for their opening statements. Augsbach Lamma, your opening statement is up first, followed by Badinski. Augsbach Lamma, please proceed with your opening statement. You have 1 minute.
Hi everyone, my name is Hannah Augsbach Lamma, and I am a student at the Darla Moore School of Business, accounting to be exact. I am currently the chair of the Senate Finance Committee, and I have been on Senate since my first semester of freshman year. I have been involved with the Finance Committee since I started, and I have loved every second of it. I have felt very committed to helping our students gain funding, and that has been seen through the increase in organizations that have worked with us after I became chair, and through the constant upkeep of various funding and the increase in funding that has been granted since I've become chair. I have always had a commitment to serve the student body and want to continue this journey. I want to make more comptrollers and make more open communication with students, and I am dedicated to serve you. Thank you.
Thank you. Badinski, you may proceed. You have 1 minute.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Brandon Badinski. I'm a junior at the College of HRSM. I'm studying sport and entertainment management. My goal as treasurer is to use every single dollar of the Student Activity Fund. The Student Activity Fund is a fund that every student in this room pays into every year with their tuition, and student organizations can request that money. This year, just like every year before this year, the entirety of that fund wasn't used. And well, when that fund isn't used, it doesn't roll over. It just disappears into the university's ether. My goal for getting all this money to every student I can is by educating, advising, and being transparent throughout the process. I want to educate clubs that all they need is an advisor, a month of good standing, registration through Garnegate, and approval from the LSC to get money. Advise them that they can use this for events, for programs. They can use this to foster community engagement and be transparent by allowing a back-end site to just see how much we've used.
Yes.
Is volume good for everyone? Or no? Are the mics on? Just make sure to speak into the mic. But let's do a check.
Check.
That
Way
one's
more?
good.
They may need to pass it back and forth.
Let's see. Check. No, right? Is there an extra mic in the back? If not,
They can pass it back.
Yeah, I think that's it.
All right.
All right, now we've got sound figured out. Thank you so much, candidates. And now we'll begin with some questions for you. Remember, you each have a minute to answer each of these, and if you wish to rebut, please raise your hands. We'll start with a general question for both of you, and we will, Augsbach Lamma, you'll answer this first, and then Badinski, you'll have your chance to answer it. What is your top priority if elected? Please be specific and outline actionable steps you will take to achieve that goal.
My top goal as in this position is to get more organizations to start to engage with student government. I feel that we do a very good job at outreach right now, but we can always do better. I want to do this by increasing the number of comptrollers we have and increasing the communication between us and the student body. I think that this will increase the amount of funding that we are able to give out, and also will make it so that we are more equitable in the organizations that we give money to.
Yes.
I just want to make note that we didn't have any comptrollers this year. And yes, any installation of this would be a great benefit to what we have in place now. What Ms. Augsbach Lamma said is a great point, but we're simply building on nothing right here. The sky's the limit.
So we did not have comptrollers this year, but that's because we didn't have a treasurer's office this year. We had deputy secretaries of finance that acted very similarly to comptrollers. I do not believe we had enough of them. However, just point of information, we did have one.
Thank you so much. Badinski, it's your turn to answer the question. Would you like me to repeat it?
Yes, please.
What is your top priority if elected? Please be specific and outline actionable steps you will take to achieve that goal.
Absolutely. I touched on it during my opening statement. I want to allocate every single dollar that every single one of us paid the university with. Education, we're going to do that by teaching clubs that all they need, an advisor, a month good standing, or a semester good standing, registration through Garnegate, and approval from the LSC. You advise them that they can use this for events, programs. They can use this for community outreach or just to help foster a sense of community on campus. And then being transparent, I didn't get to touch on that as much, but I want to be transparent because I want to be able to let student organizations see throughout their finance request just exactly how that's going. Currently, we have no system in place for that. I want to create a back-end system where we can see just how much of the student activity fund we've used for a fiscal year because, as I mentioned earlier, we've never used the entirety of it.
So to touch on the fact that the whole student organization budget hasn't been used, that's not entirely true. 98% of the student organization budget has already been used, and the fiscal year doesn't end until June, so we are on track to finish the student organization budget this year. And kind of going off of the transparency thing, we do already have a live budget. I completely agree that it needs to be more publicized so that people have more access to it. However, that does already exist, and we have been using the budget.
Awesome. We're going to move on to the next question. Badinski, you'll start. So why do you think it's important that this position is reinstated, and how will you prove that this position is necessary for student government?
I think it's important this position be reinstated because currently requesting finances for student organizations is one of the most inequitable experiences on campus. I've been able to speak to a number of club leaders that believe their organizations, but they aren't able to request the funding that they need to put on events that would help them represent the university the best way they can. By reinstalling this position, by installing comptrollers that are competent and care to outreach to new organizations, that's how we achieve this. That's why it's important to the body.
Okay.
I think that this role is important to reinstate because as my position as chair of the finance committee, I've talked to tens, if not hundreds, of student organizations about the process they've gone through funding, and I've also heard their complaints up front and face-to-face, and that was a big reason why I wanted to run in the first place and why I wrote the referendum to bring the treasurer back, was because I heard that they were having trouble communicating with student government, that they were having trouble learning how to make requests, and that wasn't really in my jurisdiction at that time. And so I really think that this position is important because it makes a strong line of communication for students to come and learn how to request funding and make it more equitable. I agree that there can be way better communication between the student body and student government. That's why I made the referendum for the treasurer to come back in the first place.
Thank you so much. Moving on to the next question. Previous student government treasurer, Caden Askew, stated that removing the treasurer role would increase efficiency for student organizations to receive funds. Why do you disagree with this statement? Augsbach, Lamma, you're first.
So when students are requesting funding, the person that they're supposed to be working with when the treasurer was in office were the comptrollers. Currently, it's the deputy secretaries of finance, except this was really inefficient because there's a period of time where we don't have deputy secretaries of finance. On our committee, we had to interview these candidates in order for them to come in, and it was a process that took time. We had to find candidates, have them get approved by Senate, and then have them approved by the finance committee. This took a lot of time. There was a period of time in that student organizations had no one to talk to. In my opinion, that's not efficient at all. And even once they were brought into this position, there was a length of time where no one knew who their comptrollers really were, deputy secretaries of finance, and it was very unclear who people were supposed to talk to. And in my opinion, that doesn't make things more efficient. It makes them far less.
If you would repeat it.
Absolutely. Previous student government treasurer, Caden Askew, stated that removing the treasurer role would increase the efficiency for student organizations to receive funds. Why do you disagree with this statement?
Absolutely. I think Ms. Augsbach Lamma touched on it very well. Every organization needs a comptroller. They need a figurehead that they can reach out to that can directly assist them with funding. We simply don't have enough finance secretaries or deputies of finance to make this possible as it is currently. By reinstalling this position, we're simply allowing this to possibly and hopefully become a more equitable process. With more comptrollers, there's more outreach. With more outreach, there's more opportunity for student organizations to learn and to advise, and then hopefully these comptrollers will just be transparent with the parties throughout the entire time.
Okay, with no rebuttal, we'll move on to the next question. Badinski, you'll start. So you both have history in the Student Senate. Why have you chosen to pursue a role as treasurer and not further a path in the Student Senate?
Absolutely. Student Senate is extremely impactful. And when one of my initiatives was, as a senator this year, head of the delegation to my own college, was to completely fill those Senate seats. I believe that working with Mr. Colin Crick, if any of you know him, we were able to identify candidates that were willing and able to step up and lead for the College of HRSM. It's not that I don't want to be a senator. I would love to be able to continue to represent my college, but I would love to be able to help every student organization get the funding they need so much more.
Yeah, so as the head of the finance committee, like I said before, I've talked to many student organizations about their struggles with requesting funding, and I think because of that, it makes me a very good candidate to solve those issues, especially in such a big transition, since we haven't had a treasurer in quite a long time. And when we did, it was more during COVID time when events and conferences weren't as prevalent. Now we're looking at a time where there are events, there are conferences, and it's going to be a big change to go from not having it to having it again. And I think my experience since I've been in the department for my whole time in student government will make me a good person to ease that transition and make it go a little bit more smoothly.
All right, thank you so much. You've survived the general questions. We'll move on to candidate questions that are more specific to you and to your personal campaigns. We will ask Badinski questions first. We have 2 questions for each of you. Badinski, your first question: what do you think makes the process of requesting funds difficult for student organizations? How do you plan to simplify this process?
Absolutely. So currently, with most things, the difficulty is education. Ignorance is one of the major obstacles in my life when I encounter something new, and it's no different for most of these organizations. I've had to, Mr. Morgan can attest, talk to a number of organizations this week and just teach them how to get to it through Garnet Gate. Clubs don't understand how they can get this money. They don't understand that it is theirs to take, and I just feel like I would be able to help them get where they need to be.
Awesome. Next question. In your interview, you mentioned wanting to create an app or a website to help track the usage of the Student Activity Fund. Can you elaborate on this a little bit, please? And then your plan to be able to do this.
Absolutely. Ms. Augsbach Lamma touched on, there is a current finance tracker, but it's not public to the students. The Student Activity Fund is literally a part of everyone's tuition. We have every right to know where that money's going and how much we have to allocate. I would work with student government advisors and then our delegates from the colleges of computers and engineering, and be able to work with them to create a sort of back-end system with Self-Service Carolina through assistance of the DOIT. We'd be able to make something that students can actually see just how much we have to spend and how much we've spent.
Thank you so much. Ms. Augsbach Lamma, we have questions for you now. First, in your interview, you stated, quote, "The fund requesting process is pretty straightforward now, but no one knows about it," end quote. How do you plan to communicate this process to the student body?
I think a lot of that is through collaboration with other branches of the executive staff. Working with the VP's office will be very important in getting that out on social media and kind of really getting it out to the public, because that's where more of social media is usually where we get a lot of our information today, and that's where a lot of that will be able to get out. Like specifically when we had a treasurer's workshop this semester, it was very last minute that it got posted just because of timing and things like that. And that's no one exactly's fault. However, like if we are more intentional about making sure that communication is open and done more in advance, more people will be able to know about things like that.
Yes, go ahead.
As the chairwoman of the Finance Committee, Ms. Augsbach Lamma had plenty of opportunities to actually make good on those initiatives this fiscal year. And while I commend her doings, I do think that there has been ample opportunity to work with the Vice President's office, and there were ample opportunities to notify the entirety of the student body about treasurer workshops.
To start, I don't run treasurer's workshops. I did attend as my role because I wanted to be able to answer questions, but that wasn't exactly my job. But also, I did do a lot in my position to increase attendance at these treasurer's workshops. Actually, there were more student organizations there this year than there had been in any past.
In your interview, you also mentioned, quote, wanting to make sure that all organizations have an equal opportunity to get funding. What currently prevents organizations from getting funding, and how do you plan to achieve this goal?
Once again, that goes back to most organizations just don't know about the funding. My own organization that I'm in didn't know that they could request funding until I brought it up. So I think a lot of that is just going to be outreach, once again, with the Vice President's office, but also being intentional and going to these committees and going to these clubs and organizations and talking to them and like finding the leadership a little bit more intentionally than just having them come to us and expect them to be able to find it themselves. And yeah.
Thank you so much, candidates. Those are all the questions we have for you. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Next, we're going to be hearing from our Speaker of the Student Senate candidates, Cameron Eubanks and Jordyn Velez. Candidates, please come forward to the stage. I realized that I forgot it was Mr. So I'll start. Thank you guys for being here today. So we're going to start with the opening statements. Awesome. If you want to do a test really quick, make sure that works.
Test. Wow, it
Sounds like it is
works.
working.
It works.
Okay, Mr. Eubanks, you'll start with your opening statement, followed by Ms. Velez. Mr. Eubanks, you may begin.
Hi, my name is Cameron Eubanks. I'm a junior international studies and criminal justice double major with a theater minor. In student government, I've been a senator in the 112th and 113th term for the College of Arts and Sciences. I also am currently serving as the Director of Student Services in the Office of the Student Body President. Outside of student government, I'm a member of the Alpha Sigma Phi Social Fraternity, also the PAD Pre-Law Fraternity as well. My one goal as Speaker of the Student Senate is to invigorate interest in Student Senate from underrepresented communities by implementing a three-pronged plan: transition, transform, and transcend. Ultimately, we'll tackle issues such as parking reform, advising, academics, Title IX reform, all of those issues together. And I know these seem as lofty goals, but my one role as Speaker of the Senate is to make these a tangible reality and make a better Carolina and a better tomorrow. Thank you.
All right, my name is Jordyn Velez. I am a second year political science major, Spanish minor, and law and society minor. So I was elected into the 114th Senate, and I served as a senator until I was moved to the chief of staff spot for the Speaker of the Student Senate, where I currently serve. So I have both a senatorial perspective, and also I was able to see the behind the scenes. And the reason that I'm here today is because when I was tabling to finally collect recommendations and promises from people, or kind of what they wanted to see changed, a lot of people don't really fully understand Senate. And I think that that's a big issue, because we are not doing what we can to make sure that people know that they have the option of student government to come to. And we also don't have much inclusion in the body. So I want to make sure that we're promoting an inclusive environment for everyone.
Thank you, candidates. We're now going to proceed with some general questions, and we're going to start off with Mr. Eubanks. How do you plan on diversifying this composition of the Student Senate to better represent the student population?
So as Speaker of the Student Senate, I can't necessarily force people to run for Student Senate or even have a gung-ho attitude about student government. But what we can do is create a more bipartisan Student Senate so students feel that they are more represented and feel that it's more of an inclusive environment for them to join. I think Senate outreach is a very important topic, and kind of my goals through my three-pronged plan is to have outreach, but to have each committee hold town halls to make sure that students can receive information about what the academics committee can be doing for that student, and hopefully that'll encourage the student to join Senate or to join student government and to take the initiative about those specific issues.
Ms. Velez.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you plan on diversifying the composition of the Student Senate to better represent the student population?
Yeah, so I definitely agree that making a better environment in Senate is definitely necessary. That's why currently as Chief of Staff, I make sure to reach out to all the new senators and make sure that they feel included. That was a problem that I had. And I think that one of the best ways we can diversify the Senate body is actually reaching out to organizations, making sure that people are getting talked to at places they already go to. Asking someone to come out for a town hall sometimes seems like something that deviates from what they're already doing and they don't necessarily want to take that time. But if we're going to club meetings, we're emailing those clubs or fraternities or sororities, we're kind of hitting them where they already are and maybe giving them an option they didn't know that they had.
All right, wonderful, thank you. Second question, Ms. Velez, you will start. How do you plan to improve transparency of Senate meetings so that students can feel more knowledgeable and aware of what happens in the Senate chambers?
Right, so there are several things that I want to do for this. So first of all, I don't think that we appropriately kind of promote Senate. I think that if we use better advertising, like in Russell House, to show that it's happening, a lot of people don't even know when it's happening. They just see the pretty banners inside of the theater. And we need to transition the way that we do the live stream. A lot of college students aren't using Facebook. This is just not something that they want. And among that, the Senate Drive, I don't know if anyone has ever seen it. It is very convoluted and it's very difficult to get through if you've not used a Drive before. So we need to condense that and make it better and possibly start with a newsletter with condensed information.
Yeah, I think making Senate sessions and Senate legislation more transparent to students is very important. I would say that the Google Drive is a mess. I don't think that's under debate here. I would say that switching to a different platform, not necessarily with the Google Drive, but with live streaming Senate, it is a very important task. Switching to platforms such as YouTube or other video streaming platforms other than Facebook is really important. But overall, I would say that meeting with students and actively having committees say this is what we're doing and this is what we want to do, that is being transparent to students. Saying we're gonna put up advertisements, outside of Russell House or more than just outside these walls are all great and good, but when you don't actually speak to the students, how are you supposed to know what they actually want? And how are you supposed to know how to actively represent them in a student body?
Yeah, go ahead.
So in terms of speaking to students, that's why I created Ask a Senator, where we're going to be going out more than once a semester to trade treats for some types of recommendations and complaints. I actually did it recently and we got over 50 different complaints and we compiled it and put it in a drive so that senators have easy access to things that students actually want done.
Okay, next question. So this is going to start with Mr. Eubanks. So in the past, the Student Senate has struggled to fill seats. How do you plan to get students interested in getting involved with student government?
I think that probably the main point in getting students involved is just, again, open communication, right? I agree. I think the Ask the Senator initiative was a great idea. It was the first time it happened, I think, maybe this week. And so as speaker, I would love to do Ask a Senator more often, right? I would also love to do a bigger version of that, right? Specifically talking with student organizations about certain issues that affect their organization specifically. So we're talking about not necessarily town halls, but these organizational visits that are more focused on, let's say, academics, diversity, inclusion, Greek life, all of this type of issues that students face, but being a little bit more specific than just tabling on Green Street and hoping someone's gonna come by and get a snack. right? We want to make sure that it's possible for these students to have face-to-face time with their representatives, and ultimately that will encourage students to hopefully join student government.
Yes, go ahead.
As I said before, Ask a Senator wouldn't be the sole initiative that we would be doing. I actually proposed emailing to be able to talk and have meetings with these clubs. So I think that that's also an important part of the platform and shouldn't be ignored.
Ms. Velez, you may answer the question. Would you like me to repeat it? Yes, ma'am. Awesome. In the past, the Student Senate has struggled to fill seats. How do you plan to get students interested in getting involved with student government?
Yeah, so I think that the biggest way to fill those seats, okay, so filling the seats is one thing, but I think that the bigger issue is actually filling those seats with people that accurately represent the colleges, because a School of Engineering student isn't necessarily going to want someone that is a College of Arts and Sciences student representing them. I don't think that they are going to be able to appropriately address those needs. So making sure that we're going out to clubs that are specific to engineering, or maybe talking with the school, making sure that the school sends out an email that would reach them specifically. You know, there are many ways that we can talk to these groups to make sure that the appropriate people are filling those spots.
And I would say, you know, again, emailing is great, but it's actually putting in the face-to-face time with these students that makes the difference. Going face-to-face to specific organizations and specific multi-organizations, right? We want to diversify Senate, not just have the same type of person over and over again.
I would like to again state that I didn't just say that emails were the only way that we were reaching out. I also talked about actively going to these clubs and having meetings with them.
Thank you so much. During the 114th Student Senate, there were 2 speakers and 4 speakers pro tempore. How do you plan to stabilize the Senate during your term? Velez, you may start.
All right, so the way to stabilize the Senate is probably to make sure that we have the speakers actually talking to all of those senators and keeping kind of tabs on what's happening, how they're feeling, and things like that. We need better meetings, we need more meetings, we need to make sure that the senator or the speaker is able to put in that time to have those individual relationships with them, going out to those committees and making sure that everything is good on that front, because when we have that kind of tension that's not being resolved, and also making sure that the people in those roles are committed to staying in that spot, and yeah, just better communication, making sure those people want to be there.
I would say that, again, communication is great, like I've been saying the entire time, but what you need to do is actually create a positive bipartisan nature of Student Senate, right? We want to focus on legislation that is not divisive. We want to focus on legislation that actually affects students in their everyday lives rather than national government issues. That's how you create a more positive environment in Senate, and ultimately that'll get the Senate turnover to decrease and get senators to stay and actually put in the work. Because when you're debating the death penalty for 3 weeks on end, right, that's not really serving the student body in any capacity. But when you're actively trying to add more water bottle filling stations to Gambrell, which is a very old building, that actively gets students involved, and that changes how a student lives on their everyday lives.
Some legislation is just going to be divisive by nature, and that's okay. We don't need everyone to come to terms with everything. And I think one way that we can handle this is better parliamentary procedure. I actually chaired and did debate for several years, so I'm kind of an expert in it by now. And so if we add that training and make sure that people are being civil, it will help to make it less contentious in the Senate.
Yeah, I would say civil discourse comes right in with having a bipartisan and a positive student senate. So civil discourse needs to be brought back into the conversation.
Awesome. Now we're going to move on to more individual questions. We'll start with Mr. Eubanks. So you previously applied and were denied twice for the Division Secretary of Student Services position. Why were you denied, and how does this experience affect how you plan to take on the speaker role?
Yeah, so I was put up for a student senate vote for the Division Secretary of Student Services. This was a brand new position, started just this year. And so in the codes, there were some discrepancies about whether the position, was a managerial position or an expert position. So that led to a lot of confusion in the senators' minds. And so ultimately, I did not get the nomination, but President Newton saw that I was one of the best candidates for the job. And so I was able to transition my experience and my action plan into a role on her staff. And so while, I may not have gotten the position, being in Senate for the 2 terms before that, and then now being in the executive branch, seeing creating the bill, creating the change, and then implementing the change in the executive branch ultimately makes me the best candidate for this job and has definitely improved my student government skills.
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Velez.
Mr. Eubanks was actually denied from the position because he had a section on disability services that was about yay big. And when asked and told in the memorandum to change it in order to have a larger section, he did not, and that's why he was denied the second time.
I would just like to say that in my interview with President Newton, my action plan was over 12 pages long for a position that was over 6 departments. And so it was one of the most extensive action plans that President Newton has ever seen, and she said that on the Senate floor.
Go ahead.
I believe that the reason was that those people with disabilities deserve the same amount of attention that maybe academics were deserving of, so that's kind of played into that decision.
Okay, next question.
As part of your campaign, you mentioned wanting to streamline and improve student services on campus. What services would you specifically want to improve, and how do you plan to make these improvements?
Right, so student services is one of the biggest things we have on campus. What I want to streamline is advising. I think the #1 issues on campus is parking, advising, and pretty much everything falls under that. With advising, I want to help the president emeritus transition each college into a professional model of advising. Instead of having your professor advise you, have a professional that was hired just to advise. I think that's a very important transition, and I think that's, as a student senate, we can help the president usher in that change. When it comes to Title IX reform that falls under student services, destigmatizing reporting Title IX issues, and also making sure that the reporting process is quicker and the investigations are more secure, and that everyone feels that it's more confidential. I also want to streamline Greek life as well. We want to make it more accessible so more students can experience it. So I want to partner with the Greek life and FSL office to have a student government FSL scholarship to make rushing more accessible.
Awesome. In your interview, you talked about some bigger issues. Oh, am I at the right place? Sorry. Sorry, excuse me. I'm moving on to Ms. Velez. You mentioned in your interview that you recently held an event called Ask a Senator, asking students what their main concerns are. How do you plan to address these concerns?
Right, so there are some bigger concerns, some more little concerns, and the way that my advisor and I had talked about is, so some of those are going to be needed to be given to the president's office or the vice president's office. So first is delegating which office is best done, and then secondly is picking out those ones that can be tangibly done through either, we have to decide if it's going to be like a resolution or a recommendation and what committee it would be best in, and finding which senators it is. So if we're talking about maybe those street lights are out, then we're going to make sure that maybe health and safety is getting that and making sure that they're writing a recommendation, making sure that they're talking to whoever they need to be on campus, and making sure that it's just given to the best people possible and that the right people are contacted about it, and making sure that they follow through also.
Yeah, I would say that when it comes to changes that you hear from students, right, you want to make sure that all 3 branches of student government are moving in the same direction when it comes to that change. And so one of the things that I want to provide is a more synergetic environment and a more cohesive environment between the executive branch and the legislative branch, having us pass recommendations or resolutions on that issue, and then having the executive branch cabinet secretaries actually implement those issues.
I agree, and that's why we have those executive meetings. So if we were to get the role, we would make sure that that's sent out. And also, if I was into this exec office, I would like the execs to be able to meet more and kind of have a more intimate relationship to make sure that things are getting done appropriately.
Thank you. In your interview, you talked about some bigger issues like parking and Wi-Fi that you said you can address, but, quote, not put them into action, end quote. How do you plan on being transparent with the student body about the limitations that student government faces?
Right, student government has a lot of limitations, like for example with Wi-Fi, student government can't fix that on their own. We have to make sure that we go through administration, we have to make sure that we're talking with the president, and we need to make sure that they're getting that done. I think that student government people have a very common trend of making very big promises that are attractive to people so that people get their support. And we also want to take credit for big things. And I think that that's not always possible because sometimes you have to focus on the little things, and sometimes in our position, big things are just not possible. So just making sure that all that information is accessible. And if someone asks us to get something done, being like, I can connect you with this person, this person, this person, I can have this meeting, but maybe, this is something that's gonna have to get done through the president. So not trying to do that credit claiming, I think is a really big part.
I would say that I completely agree with Ms. Velez on making sure that students understand our limitations, but also pushing what student government is capable of. Right? I want to make sure that every student senator has a working relationship with actual South Carolina legislators, because that right there, a lot of these issues are state level issues. So if student senators are able to have that relationship with legislators, they're able to advocate on a state level that'll ultimately help us push student government in the right direction.
I want to note, well, that's a great idea. It's a really, really big task to get every one of those senators connected with a legislator. So I think it's better to focus on the administration. And if we can do that, that's amazing. But I don't think that that is a realistic expectation.
I would say that student government hosts Carolina Day, one of the biggest days of the year, where we have students meet face to face with the state legislators. I don't understand why we can't do that more. I don't understand why we can't do that all year long. And that's exactly a change that I want to see happen.
Okay, we're going to do some more general questions. You'll both have 60 seconds to answer. Mr. Eubanks, we're going to start with you. So over 4,000 students voted in the last student government election. How will you represent and reach out to students who don't vote this year?
Yeah, I think it's important that as executive officers and as even just senators, we represent our constituents. And so it's making sure that we have these open lines of communication through town halls, through org visits, through those things to make sure that we're listening to what each student wants from us. And it's making sure that that process is more specific, right? So we have a more specific town hall, or we have a more specific org visit about just academics or just about diversity and inclusion. That type of specific nature will help the students kind of guide their thoughts and their ideas on those issues.
Ms. Velez.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, absolutely. So over 4,000 students voted in the last student government election. How will you represent and reach out to students who don't vote this year?
Right, so that again is kind of a transparency issue, but I also would like to touch on with that, one of the reasons that a lot of people don't vote in student government elections is because they don't feel like student government is representing them or doing anything at all. So making sure that when we reach out and we attend club meetings, we're asking them what they want and also showcasing what we have already done. So that way it gives them almost an incentive to push that forward so that we get that pattern going. They're like, oh, I see that we maybe passed a resolution to get Chargers in Williams-Brice Stadium, which was a resolution passed by the Health and Safety Committee. Oh, I really like that. So I should probably push forward with people that I think are going to continue that.
Yeah, and I would say kind of showcasing what we already have is very important, but also partnering with the executive branch to showcase what student government has done as a whole. Because we're not just a senator or an executive cabinet member. We are one student government pushing for the same initiatives and ideals, and we need to showcase that rather than just one branch.
Thank you so much. We have one final question for you. Ms. Velez, you will answer this first. Talk about a specific leadership learning experience you have had and how those lessons will equip you to be a stronger Speaker of the Senate.
Right, so when I was put into Chief of Staff, I'll be honest, the role needed some updating and work. So I feel like a lot of people that were under us, they didn't really have a lot of trust in the role that I was going to be able to get back to them, that I was going to update things, and that I was just going to support them in general. So when people started coming to me, the senators started coming to me, that meant a really big deal to me. I'm always in the Leadership Service Center where the student government office is, and I make sure that I'm always present there for them, and I'm pretty good about responding back, and I hope that I was able to create an environment in which they feel welcome. I think that that's kind of something that we need to push forward, and I think that that's probably the proudest leadership role that I've had in this job.
I would say that when I took over as the chairman of the academics committee from Taylor Harris, I'll be honest, I was nervous, I was scared. I had so many ideas about what I wanted to change about the classroom environment, I didn't know where to start. But I leaned on my senators, and I leaned on my fellow student government officials to help me figure out my ideas and to help me figure out how we can actionably use those ideas. And so through that, the committee was able to pass reforms on advising, reforms on mental health days into the academic calendar, and ultimately reforms into how the classroom experience is for every student. And so I would say that leadership position has helped me grow just very largely. And I'll be honest, leaning on my fellow student government officials and hopefully my fellow executive officers is a part of the job, and it's a welcomed part of the job.
Thank you so much, candidates. That's all we have for you.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm nervous about time.
Yeah.
How long? 5 minutes? 10.
We will now have a 10-minute intermission if you'd like to stand up and stretch your legs. We will proceed back at 8 p.m.
and we'll say our names again, just so we can.
Welcome back to SGTV's coverage of the 2023 Student Government Executive Candidate Debate. I'm Elizabeth Martinez.
And I'm Meagan Daukshus. We just listened to the debates with the treasurers and the Speaker of the Student Senate. We heard from Augsbach, Lamma, along with
Augsbach, Lamma,
and
Badinski.
And then we also heard from
Eubanks
and Velez.
Yes.
So for the treasurer, they discussed how the student government budget does exist to the public. This is something that is not known to the public, but it does exist to the public. Lamma was saying that it needs to be more aware to the public for students, staff, and USC Gamecocks to know what's going on with the student government.
Yeah,
budget.
I just want to clarify, rather than public, but the student body. The student body itself, a lot of the student body isn't aware that their tuition goes to the, what is it called? Student Activity Fund, the Student Activity Fund. And so they're paying, and the budget is, I think, approximately $55,000, somewhere along there. And a lot of this money is not being used to its best ability. So that topic was on the table tonight for the treasurer debate.
Yes, they were not, and a lot of organizations on campus are not aware that this money is out there for them to use for their clubs and organizations.
Yeah, so both treasurer candidates were discussing how they were going to get awareness to these organizations that they do have access to these funds. So that's extremely important for the students as well.
And then we just listened to the Speaker of the Student Senate candidates as well. And one of the discussions being brought up was creating a more connection with the students on campus and discussing about student issues rather than national issues, which was something they had a long debate of in the past, a 3-week debate of for a national issue. Eubanks says he wants to create a closer relationship with these students on the campus and make sure they're focusing on student issues like creating more water fountains in an older building like Rinderle, he said, because that's something that's going to affect a student's life and that's something they need to be able to use while they are on campus.
Yes, both candidates were definitely very adamant in making sure that students were impacted by the issues that were addressed by the committee rather than just national issues such as the death penalty, something that doesn't really impact us personally. Cameron Eubanks' campaign seems pretty persistent in implementing a more positive environment in student government as well and focusing on what actually matters. Is there anything that stood out to you personally in Eubanks and Velez debate?
I'm just interested to see what else they have to say throughout their campaigns, and I'm also interested in see, and coming up, the vice president candidate along with the two presidential candidates after the break.
So stay tuned with us. We will have those debates coming up shortly. For SGTV News 4, I'm Elizabeth Martinez.
And I'm Meagan Daukshus.
Welcome back to tonight's debate. And now we will be hearing from the candidate for Student Body Vice President, Abrianna Reaves. Thank you for coming to the stage. Ms. Reaves, please proceed with your opening statement. Remember, you have 1 minute.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name's Abrianna Reaves, and honestly, if you told my timid younger self that she'd be up here today with the opportunity to serve as your Student Body Vice President, she would have never believed you. But I can't think of a better way to give back to this university than to do that exactly. In this last year and a half, I've had the opportunity to serve in numerous organizations and serve in marketing and communications roles that would lend itself extremely well to this position. From these connections and relationships that I've made on campus, I've heard students' hopes and issues with this university that have just gone unheard and unresolved. And I believe that very firmly that my running mate, Emmie Thompson, and I will change that. We're here to offer tangible solutions through the $55,000 student government budget that comes out of all of our tuitions. Through that, we want to address the issues on campus that we all face, which is parking, game day safety, and we just want to put the students first.
Thank you so much, Ms. Reaves. We will now proceed with some questions. As you are the only official candidate for the vice presidential position, how are you prepared to work with any of the possible presidential candidates?
Yeah, of course. That's a great question. I think I'm really focused on who I'm working for, which is the students, not necessarily who I'm working with. This position is not about the title or anyone that is in these positions in proximity to mine necessarily. I think that if we're all focused on the common goal of helping the students, there should be no issue there. And I'm really here to advocate for these issues that students are facing on campus and communicate them effectively, and specifically in my role. And I don't think that there should be any difference in that, no matter who I'm working with on the executive board.
Next question is, what external programming initiatives do you plan on pursuing during your term as vice president?
So I think that one of the programs that I'm very passionate about, because I've had a lot of time to serve with issues surrounding it, is food insecurity and fighting hunger. This specific program would be Gamecock Pantry. I really want to emphasize this and expand on it because it's an issue that not a lot of people per se believe is real. A lot of people face food insecurity, and it's something that's very real. While you can't see it, it definitely is an issue that we should all be focused more on. And I think that bringing more hands-on work to this while donating food is amazing, and it's great, and that should continue and expand as well. I believe that seeing the people face-to-face that you're helping even more is extremely important.
Thank you. You mentioned in your interview with us that a business core class, Business Administration 301, is a good example of a possible Carolina core class that will be beneficial for any student's future. Can you elaborate more on your visions for the future of Carolina core for all USC students?
Of course, this is something that I'm very passionate about that I mentioned in my interview. I think that our educational journey throughout college should truly be focused on our success after college and after graduation. This doesn't just mean educationally through academics, but also those life skills that we all need later on in life. These professional skills that I spoke on before, but also skills focused on physical and mental wellness is something that I think would be extremely important for administration to implement as a course, because it's something that, quite frankly, while yes, there are programs outside of it, if someone doesn't have the opportunity to learn about that in the classroom and take a course that they are truly passionate about, I don't think it really allows us to truly represent the student body through these courses that are offered. And I think that having these courses in place, focusing on physical and mental wellness, would be extremely beneficial to students and their success after college.
So every candidate that we've interviewed has said that students have been dissatisfied with the performance of student government in the past, but this is largely because students are pressing issues that are out of student government's control. How do you plan on being transparent with students about the limitations that student government faces and the real power that it does have?
Something that I think is very important with this, and with my role specifically, is the one-on-one connection and communication with students. it's something that we've also highlighted in our platform, but don't want to just leave here in campaign season, is being transparent about the money that we have and the things that we're able to do with this, like create these discounted parking passes, create these parking guides, create safety surrounding game day with these charger plugs in the stadium and Uber discounts on game day. And like I said, overall, just communicating this through the social media better, but also not everyone follows student government social media as much as we'd like it, but collaborating with organizations and being very transparent and just telling them one-on-one.
Thank you so much. Now we have some questions for you that were sent to us by the student body. These questions were submitted via our social media platforms. What are your plans for transitioning the Carolina Closet out of the Vice President's control?
So I think that with this, it's very important. I will be very transparent that it's something that I will, through this transition from the current Vice President, through me, need to learn a lot more about, and I'm very prepared for that because it just would show the adaptability I have. But I think that specifically with this, it's important to train those that are coming after me as I'm being trained and being transparent with them about this, and just really focusing in on what could help better this initiative as it is moving out of the Vice President's office.
Awesome. Second question from the audience is, what specific steps do you plan to take to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion in student government?
So I think that this is something I'm very passionate about because, as you all know, I haven't been in student government since my freshman year, first semester, so I was able to see it from the outside, and I did see that it was a somewhat closed-off environment. It did feel as if it was only people of the same majors, a lot of people that come from the same backgrounds, and I really want to increase that specifically through internal programs that first can have student government moving as a cohesive unit. I think if everyone in student government is able to get to know each other in these different sectors, this will show externally. And once implementing these programs where internally, where the student government members can get to know each other, that externally this will show through.
Thank you. We'll proceed back to some more general questions. How do you plan to lead student committees, and how will you voice concerns to administration?
I think that leading committees is something that, as I've spoken before, should be very relationship-based. I don't think that it should be something where you go in, have your meetings, or just speak to them briefly, but you have constant communication with them. This is something that is very important to me and that I believe should be a constant communication, constant line of communication, just being overall an open person to these committee heads, and also not just the leaders of the committee, but those on the committees. And I think that hearing their concerns directly, I'll be able to voice these in my position.
So you've said you have a very limited amount of time actually spent in student government. How do you think you have the experience to be able to take on the vice president role?
I think that just my experience here on campus in my short year and a half here, being that I serve currently as a director of social media for Alpha Gamma Delta, I've served on marketing and diversity, equity, and inclusion committees for Alpha Kappa Psi, also being a member of Gamecock Consulting Club, and then within student government being the professional fraternity chair on Greek relations. I just think all of this shows the amount of connections I've made and the amount of communication that I've had to do with a lot of different kinds of people on campus, which is a huge part of what the vice president does. It's communicating with leaders on campus and having their voices heard within the leadership of student government. And I just think that my communication skills and also being a marketing major and having these communications roles is extremely important, because a lot of resources on campus that are offered for students, they quite simply don't know about.
What is something you would like to do differently than past vice presidents?
I think something that I'd like to do differently is just being, per se, more like welcoming to outside people outside of student government, and being transparent about this, because, as I said before, seeing the outside of student government, I didn't know as much about the leaders in student government. I being in these organizations outside of student government didn't know anything about it until I made connections with people that were within this organization. And I think that that's extremely important, just having that visibility there for other people on campus, because it really is about serving students all across the board on campus, and you can't do that unless you're in a constant line of communication with them. And I think that's something that would help me with my lack of experience, is just being very transparent with those that I am in leadership with, but also those across campus to hear their needs and wants.
Thank you. Those are all the questions we have for you. Thank you for being here tonight. Presidential candidates, please make your way to the stage.
That's pretty good.
Mic check, mic check.
Make sure it's turned on.
Okay, mic check. It's still, yeah.
I will do the passing.
Passing.
We love collaboration.
Hold on. Cool.
We got it. He's got the magic touch.
It's Ewan. It's Ewan.
Thank you, candidates, for being here today. So these are our candidates for the position of student body president. We have Reilly Arford and then Emmie Thompson. So candidates, we'll start off by having Mr. Arford start off with his opening statement. You have 60 seconds.
Yeah, hey everybody. So like Caroline just said, my name is Reilly Arford. I am a third-year economics and political science double major. And kind of my goals for student government is to put the student back into student government. How does that look, right? So we want to start by building equitable and fair seats for everybody at the table, right? Nobody should feel scared or unwelcome at our table in our Carolina collective, right? The second part of that is challenging students to sit at other tables. In college, we hear the term experiential learning all the time, learning from experiences. Students should have the opportunities as well as be challenged to go into other communities and experience their culture, because that's the only way that you learn, and that's the only way you get new experiences. And then the third part of that is teaching students. As Ms. Reaves said, student government has been seen as this exclusionary club, this closed off place because of the many facets, rules, and regulations that come with being in student government. So a lot of students don't want to get involved. My goal is to teach students and to teach them how to be in student government and how to be within student government. Thank you.
Ms. Thompson.
Well, thank y'all so much for being here today. I'm Emmie Thompson, and I'm running to be your next student body president because I want to put students first. When I came to college, I knew that I wanted to serve others, but I kind of struggled with figuring out a way to do this that was within my means. So I believe student government can be this outlet when it's utilized to put student needs first. Through student government's budget of over $55,000 that comes out of y'all's tuition and fees, we will create discounted parking passes, a game day Uber discount, install charger plugs in the stadium of Willie B, and make sure to create an on-campus parking guide so everyone knows the most convenient places to park. We'll also establish communication and representation that makes every student feel valued and informed, and we'll advocate for Carolina cores that actually benefit your life after graduation. When I was in second grade, I actually wrote in my journal that it was my dream to come here and to be a real Gamecock, so I really love this university, and I can't wait to make a difference here by putting students first.
Thank you, candidates. Now we'll go into our general questions. And just a reminder of the rules, just since we have our intermission. So again, 60 seconds to answer the question, 30 seconds if you want a rebuttal, and then an additional 15 seconds if you would like to continue debate. So we're going to start off with Mr. Arford. The student body president has access to the university administration, board of trustees meetings, and more. How will you use that access to advocate for students' concerns to administration?
Yeah, so I love that question because it just shows you how much influence that the president has, right? A lot of times we hear about student government not having power to change things, and the power to change things is really in that influence, right? So my goal and my challenge is to make sure that we are utilizing that influence in those spaces like administration and the board of trustees to be able to put actionable things in place for students, right? And not just going in talking to students, but bringing students on and making sure they are involved in student government, right? And making that less terrifying, making that less fearful, and giving people an equitable chance to be a part of that, to be a part of student government, so that they know the influence that student government has over their lives, as well as over the lives of all the students.
Ms. Thompson.
So advocacy is a key part of this role, and one thing I plan to advocate for is better Carolina cores. Be it financial literacy, mental wellness, physical wellness, home economics, etc., we should be offering Carolina core classes that are actually relevant to student success after graduation and not just with their careers. So there's actually a committee being formed on the Carolina core revitalization process right now, and hopefully as the next student body president, I will be able to have a voice in this committee. Additionally, I think it's important to voice the opinions of students and issues that they are very passionate about, such as equity on campus. In fact, this past semester actually changed the name of an honors college course that was named Trial by Jury from Ancient Rome to Dylan Roof to be named after Mother Emanuel. And this may seem small, but with the access I would have as the student body president, I would be able to advocate for changes like this, but at higher levels.
Thank you. For our second question, Ms. Thompson, you'll answer first. What will be your top priority on your first day in office if you're elected?
So one huge thing for our administration would be to utilize the student government's $55,000 budget to make tangible changes. So I think making sure we do the calculations to figure out our initiatives, such as discounted parking passes on a rolling application basis, and an Uber discount on game day so students can get to and from the stadium safely, and installing phone chargers in Williams-Brice Stadium so that no student is getting separated from their friends or walking home with a dead phone. I think figuring out how we can use that budget to establish those priorities is key. Additionally, I want to make sure that I surround myself with a staff and cabinet that represents all aspects of campus, be it gender, religion, race, ethnicity, major, etc. We want to make sure that every student feels like they have a voice in student government. So recruiting all different aspects of campus is a huge priority to me.
So I'll go ahead and go. So I loved what Ms. Reaves just said, right? Or I apologize. Oh my goodness. I am so sorry. And that can go against my time. I apologize. Ms. Thompson just said, right? We need, and on my first day would be completely filled with putting people into student government that weren't originally in student government, right? Giving them access and the resources they need in student government and making that transparent for every student, right? Making sure that every student has the access, and every club, organization, resolution, Senate, everything has access and knows the resources and is educated on the resources that are at the university and student government has access to, right? And putting people of diverse backgrounds into those positions within the cabinet and within other organizations that the student body president has the control over.
Okay, beginning with Mr. Arford. So both of you have mentioned wanting to increase diversity as a part of your goal for the presidency. What specific steps do you plan to take to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion in student government?
Yeah, so that kind of touches on two of my aims, right? Build and teach, right? So that first one, build, right? Building equitable seats at the table for everybody. That means that when students come in and they look for positions in student government, they're seeing other people that, one, look like them, talk like them, or are interested in the same things as them, but also it means that when they get here, they are looking and they're researching and they're doing their research, and they know and they can see, like, clear as day that the office is focused on student diversity, right? The second part of that is teaching students, right, how to be diverse and push equity in their organizations. So when they send representatives to the student government and we ask questions about what they want from the student government, they're thinking about that within their responses.
So I think that increasing diversity is key, like we've talked about, and I think that the main way we do that is through recruitment. We have so many good organizations on campus that have a focus on DEI, so I would like to partner with them to help recruit from all aspects of campus. When I actually served my sophomore year as the Secretary of Campus Relations, I got to interact with a lot of students and student organizations and hear firsthand their concerns for campus. And And I think one thing that stood out to me was that there was a huge disconnect. And it's one, because we weren't putting students first, and two, because not all students were properly represented. So I will make sure to recruit people of all majors, all ethnicities, all genders, all religions, and all of the different aspects of campus so that every student feels like they have a voice.
Thank you. Ms. Thompson, you'll answer this next question first. The Student Senate recently passed a bill that would limit the amount of money student government candidates are allowed to spend on their campaign. The bill was brought to the Constitutional Council and it was not implemented this election season. Do you support this bill, and how has it impacted how you've managed your campaign?
So this injunction on this bill actually came the day of our candidates meeting. So when we were planning out our finances for this campaign, we were planning within that budget, and we have stayed within it of what the bill that was proposed would have allowed us to. So we have stayed within it. We've stayed very, made sure that if that had passed, we would have done everything right. But I think that the issue with that was that they created this bill so close to election season that it was so rushed and it wasn't able to be properly implemented. So if we're gonna stay on footing with other SEC schools that do have this campaign spending limit, we need to make sure that we take the time to actually make sure that it can be properly implemented prior to just a few weeks before election season.
Yeah, so I just wanted to touch on that. So the bill was actually drafted back in November, and it was only passed recently. So there's been more than enough time to be able to prepare for this in terms of the Election Commission, as well as candidates. They had more than enough time to know this bill was coming and prepare for it.
I think that since it wasn't actually passed until recently, the implementation process hasn't been put into effect until recently. But like I said, we have stayed within the bounds of that bill anyway, so.
Could you repeat the question?
Absolutely. The Student Senate recently passed a bill that would limit the amount of money student government candidates are allowed to spend on their campaign. The bill was brought to the Constitutional Council and it was not implemented in this election season. Do you support this bill, and how has it impacted how you've managed your campaign?
Yeah, so to answer the first part of that question, I 100% support this bill, right? So this bill basically would make it to where there is more equity within student government, right? And what does that mean, right? We want, and we can agree on this, both sides, want more equity and diversity in student government. That means that people from lower socioeconomic statuses who don't have access to their parents' doctors' friends or lawyers' friends or other high-paying jobs that don't have access to those people are able to still run for student government and still be able to have a voice in a direct change to student government. Now, in terms of my campaign, I have spent much less than the total capped out at $1,500 for presidential candidates. This has been a part of my my campaign from the very beginning, as I made sure that it was implemented within my campaign.
Awesome. We're going to move on to more individual questions, starting with Mr. Arford. So in your interview and today, you've mentioned, quote, needing to build seats for everybody at the table. This statement is a little broad. What does it mean for you to build seats at the table, and what tangible steps would you like to achieve this goal?
Yeah, so I think that the framing of that is extremely important, right? So when I say build seats at the table, I mean in terms of what seats are there. So when people get to college, everybody has a seat, right? Everybody is able to join whatever clubs they want to, whatever. Some people, when they get into those places, are sitting in seats like this one, a nice sturdy wooden seat, right? That I can feel safe to sit down in every single time. Some people are being forced to sit down in straw seats where they sit down and they fall right through, being made to fail, right? My goal is to make sure that whenever anybody comes and sits at the student government table or the Carolina table, we all have a place to sit and eat, right? And so to be more specific about that, it means bringing more people in, bringing students in who have another perspective other than the student government perspective, right? Like I said, we'll probably talk about, well, I'll answer it in the next one, but that's kind of what I mean.
Thank you. In your interview, you mentioned wanting to create a diversity module that would be required for freshmen. How do you plan on creating this module, and how do you hope it will impact the diversity of student government or the student body as a whole?
Yeah, so one of the things that I was talking about, right, is reaching out to organizations all across campus, right? And so that includes the diversity and equity and inclusion, right? That includes administration offices like OMSA and minority, that one. Yeah, disability centers, right? Organizations such as IRIS, right? LGBTQ plus organizations, to formulate a module that would fully encompass everything that goes into diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? So using the students, right, to build these modules instead of the people building these modules, just getting the resources from the students, right? Getting what they may feel as though students is what students care about, but actually using student organizations, actually using organizations built on diversity to create this module.
Okay, moving on to Ms. Thompson. So you've already talked about today, large part of your campaign is using $55,000 of student government funding. What does this budget typically go towards, and how will you cover your projects like you've mentioned, the parking, discounted parking, and installation of chargers?
Yeah, so this budget actually goes to a diverse array of day-to-day student government functions. So some of it goes to the executive officer stipend, some of it goes to the end of the year awards ceremony, some of it goes to things like postage and paper and printing and everyday things. But a lot of it also goes to programming, and there's also a lot of it that's allotted to the executive fund and the internal monetary fund. And I think that one thing that is really important is that we use up all of this money because it doesn't roll over. If we don't use it, the university will take it. And we want to make sure that we're getting that money back every year. So I would put the money in the internal monetary fund, the executive fund, and some of the programming budgets towards these initiatives that students have expressed continuous frustrations about. I'm sure that I'm not the only one whose phone has died on a game day and it's left them feeling very unsafe. So I think putting money towards that would be huge, so that no students leaving the game or walking home or even just separated from their friends with a dead phone.
So I do want to say with that we have to make sure that we're cautious about how we're spending money and moving. When you take money away from one thing, you're putting it into another thing. Or when you're putting money into one thing, you're taking it away from something else. So we're making sure that we're equitable in how we do that and when we do that.
I think it's important to note that the budget is already allotted for certain line items before our administration begins. That's designed this year, usually would be the treasurer, but this year by the Secretary of Finance and approved by the president and the advisors. So we would only be allowed to use it for the things that it's already allotted for.
Thank you. One of your main platform points is revitalizing Carolina Core. Can you give specifics on how the Carolina Core requirements would change and how you would persuade administration to make these changes?
So I think the persuasion element of that goes back to, this isn't just a concern I've heard from one group of students. It's something I hear from so many students on campus that they feel like they're wasting their time with certain Carolina Core classes. And so I think that that's part of how I would persuade administration that this is something that students really want to see. It's a way we can take a step forward in the right direction for generations to come. And I think that it would look different in the way that students would hopefully be able to substitute a class that's deemed unnecessary by an advisor. So for example, I'm in the journalism school. I don't necessarily need a lab science to be successful in my life after college. So I could substitute that course for, say, a class in financial literacy, because I'm sure I'm not the only one that doesn't know how to do their taxes properly. But that would be so much more beneficial to my life after college.
We will now move forward with some questions submitted to us via audience members through our social media platforms. Please note these are strictly from the audience at home. Starting with Ms. Thompson, what specific organizations did you work with as Secretary of Campus Relations, and what tangible actions and outcomes came from these relationships?
So I actually got to work with a diverse array of organizations on campus, and honestly, if I were to sit here and just list out each individual one, it would probably take up most of my speaking time. But I think the really cool thing about this job is that I got to work with the communications team on working towards a Garnet Gate tutorial, which is something that I still would love to be implemented into UN01 curriculum. And then I think I also got to just listen to students, and I think that that is something that we're missing. We have to be able to not only communicate to them, but hear from them if we're going to be able to properly represent them. I think that was something that I really learned from that position.
Awesome. Mr. Arford, next. Can you talk a little bit about why you were denied from student government?
Yeah, I actually love giving this story, right? So when I first got to college, right, I thought I was a shoo-in, right? I was a political science major, economics major. I thought I was a shoo-in for student government. It was the organization that I wanted to be a part of, and I applied for freshman council knowing I know I'm gonna get an interview, and wasn't even given an interview, right? And once I got into student government and started learning the workings behind it, I learned that there's a lot that goes into that, like such as board meetings, where oftentimes people on that board, that freshman council board that chooses people, don't even come to those meetings and just go in and approve candidates, you know, back to back to back. I think it's important to know who's on those board meetings because that happens very frequently. The other position that I was denied from is government relations. I have tangible, actual government relation experience in high school where I worked with legislators, spoke at subcommittees, spoke in front of 10,000 plus people at the South Carolina for Education, and was denied any position on the student government relations.
All right, we'll move into some more questions for you. Every year, candidates talk about their ambitious goals for campus. How do you plan to ensure that yours will be accomplished? Ms. Thompson, please start.
I think our whole campaign platform is designed around tangible things that will put students first through student government actions. So like I said, charger plugs in the stadium, that's something that the Senate has already advocated for, and it was actually something that I worked with the Campus Wellness Committee on Cabinet this year to work towards. That's something we have the money to do, and so it's something we should do. The Uber discount, we're the only SEC school that doesn't have that. And so I think that it's very important for us to stay on footing with these other SEC schools in terms of competing not only for recruitment, but also to keep our students safe on game days. I think that other things such as Carolina core revitalization is something that it's time. I think that so many students want it that we are at the point where that is a realistic goal to advocate, and especially with the committee that's being formed for it, it's the perfect time to advocate for those. And I think that communication and representation is all about effort. We have to work with other organizations on campus and expand our reach besides just student government to make sure we're recruiting from all aspects of campus and communicating all the free resources that the university offers.
So I want to just highlight a word in there, advocate, right? Student government is all about influence, but there's actionable things we can do within student government to make sure that these plans that we have already in place get put in place once we gain office, right? And not just advocate for that, but make sure that we're doing actionable things.
All right. Mr. Arford, you'll receive the same question. Every year, candidates talk about their ambitious goals for campus. How do you plan to ensure that yours will be accomplished?
Yeah, so like I just said, actionable goals, right? So my 3 pillars, right, are build, challenge, teach, right? All of that is within student government. It's things we can do within student government to make the student experience better, right? Building equitable seats means putting students, right, and getting students to feel safe in student government, right? My goals are within student government to make student government better, which makes everybody better, right? The second thing, right, challenging students to sit at other tables. That is all about influence, right? That is making sure that student government holds its influence and that people know and are aware of what resources are available within student government. That comes in the form of newsletters. That comes in the form of getting face-to-face with clubs and making sure that people on staff are going and we have people going to clubs every single week. Just like we have Senate every single week that's making legislation, we should be having people at clubs every single week within the president's office.
Okay, will be another question for both of you. Start with Mr. Arford. What differentiates you from your opponent?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing that differentiates me, other than our gender, that was a joke. I'm sorry. Is our motto, right? She wants to put students first, which is important, but I want to put the student back into student government. I want to put students who typically didn't have a chance, just like me, just like Ms. Reaves, didn't have a chance at student government, to put them in positions where they learn student government, where they know the processes, know the resources, and then giving those students or teaching those students how to teach other students to be able to come into student government and be a part of it, right? If they want to be, and if it's something that they want to be a part of. But also targeting specific communities, right? So that way, every community knows what resources are available to them, such as the veteran community, right? SVA is widely accessible to a lot of people associated with the veterans, but most people don't even know about it.
Ms. Thompson?
So I think that as student leaders, we're supposed to do more than just fix student government. We're supposed to help fix campus. And I think that there are so many issues that students want to see addressed that I plan to address in my administration. I think that what really separates me is that not only am I a hard worker and I'm driven, I have a very relational element to every single goal I set. So I'm not just here to check off some kind of leadership and service requirement or outline a vague platform. I'm here because I want to make an individual difference in the lives of students on this campus that can have a domino effect for years to come. I also think that serving in the president's office this year as a deputy chief of staff, I've gotten to see the role firsthand and really see the ins and outs and start building connections that can help prepare me for this role.
Changing campus is important, but as we've heard from every other candidate here today, students are dissatisfied with student government. So we have to make sure that our student government is secure and safe for everybody before we can even focus on campus, the problems with campus, right? My goal would be to fix student government first so that way we can focus on campus involvement, just like Ms. Thompson said, for years and years to come.
I think that you can definitely fix student government and help fix student issues simultaneously.
Well, thank you guys so much. That's all the questions we have for you today.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right. That concludes our debate period for the candidates for president, as well as our debate program for the night. For those of you who don't know, this is Emmie Thompson. He's my deputy elections commissioner.
Hello, everybody. Thank you all for coming.
He's a hard worker, and I'm really grateful to have him by my side, so yeah. I'd like to thank our moderators, Caroline Smith and Sydney Dunlap, for coming out and helping moderate this year's debate. Let's give them a round of applause, please. I would also like to thank all the candidates for participating today. This has truly been a great debate, so let's hear it for them as well. And of course, thank you to all of you attendees who came out tonight and also those watching at home. It's really important to get involved in this electoral process, so give it up for yourselves. Just a reminder, all students will be sent an email to vote. Voting will be done on Self-Service Carolina at sc.edu/elections. Polls will open at 9 a.m. on February 21st and close at 5 p.m. on February 22nd. Results will be announced on Wednesday, February 22nd at 5:30 on Green Street by yours truly. If you have any questions at all regarding the elections, please email us at saec@mailbox.sc.edu. We would like to invite everyone to enjoy the refreshments or what's left them in the back. I talked to the powers that be, and I think next year we're going to get lobster tails and oyster, maybe even some caviar. But for now, we'll settle for cookies and lemonade and water. So thank you all for coming out. Have a great night, and let's have a good election season.
Talk about what?
The vice president.
Okay. Well. Welcome back to SGTV's coverage of the 2023 Student Government Executive Candidate Debate. I'm Elizabeth Martinez.
And I'm Meagan Daukshus.
Earlier, we heard from Vice President candidate Abrianna Reaves, and we just heard from the two presidential candidates, Thompson and, Arford, excuse me. So we heard a lot of good points from each of them. Is there anything that stood out to you specifically?
I think coming from the vice president candidate, which was the only vice president candidate for the 2023 student government debate this year, she spoke saying that she is okay with working with either candidate for president as long as they are all working together for the students specifically.
Yeah, I took note of that as well. I think it's very important that she noticed that and made a point to speak on that, that no matter who ends up winning the presidential candidate spot, that she's willing to work on the issues simultaneously with both of them. Obviously, she's in a partnership with Miss Thompson, and students are interested to hear more specifically about their plan to implement financial, mental, and physical wellness classes into Carolina Core. And we also heard that Arford had plans to change and revitalize Carolina Core as well with inclusivity and diversity modules.
I think when speaking on this is an issue that they mentioned that they have heard from students a lot. Many students complain that they're taking classes that they feel were not necessary to them, and that's why they want to make these changes to the Carolina cores, like adding things like financial literacy, which is something that Thompson wants to implement that'll help you and other students after college and after graduating.
Definitely. And also, I wanted to touch base on the Thompson Reaves plan to change the parking accommodations here on campus and their safety measures. We heard a lot about that, about their plan to change the annual rate of parking from $800 to $400 a year on a rolling application. That's something that I'm sure a lot of students are interested in getting to be able to participate in this upcoming year if she does win the presidential ballot.
Also, Thompson discussed, as student leader, she wants to help fix campus for students at the same time as helping fix student government for the students. This is something that they debated back and forth on, Arford and Thompson, but Arford stated that he believes that he needs to fix student government first, as to where Thompson says she thinks that you can fix the school and the student campus life and student government at the same time to help the students.
Definitely. It's important to notice how they differentiate in that area as well. And they also made point to notice the gap between both students and student government itself. So it was very interesting to hear about how they plan to tackle that in their campaigns as well.
Thompson also discussed the budget that they have right now, which is currently $55,000, and how they want to use it and spend it completely so that they get that same budget back, and making sure it gets to new things like charging stations in Williams-Brice for game days and Uber discounts so students can get home safely.
Yes, definitely. Great points there. We heard a lot of good points this evening, a lot of good standpoints. I'm interested to see how this election plays out. That concludes SGTV's coverage of the 2023 Student Government Executive Candidate Debate. I'm Elizabeth Martinez.
And I'm Meagan Daukshus.
Thanks for joining us.